I'm Jim Collison, live from the new Gallup Studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 6, recorded on July 2nd, 2020. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the Clifton Strengths theme, one theme at a time. This season, based on developing teams and managers with Clifton Strengths. And today it's a relationship building wrap. If you're listening live, love to have you join us in the chat room. Actually, links right above me there. If you want to join us in the chat room, insert your questions there as we are going live. If you have questions after the fact, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget, if you're listening on YouTube, right below me, right there is the like button. That helps us get recognized on YouTube, and then subscribe and click the bell to make sure you're getting notifications whenever we go live. Micah Librant is our host today. Micah is a workplace consultant here. I think a senior workplace consultant here with me, or something like along those lines. Who knows? Micah, welcome back to Theme Thursday.
Thanks, Jim. Gosh, it's great to be here. I love that it's Thursday and that we can be together in different spaces now, but still together. So Theme Thursday Season 6 is where we are. And as of today, we are 3/4 of the way through the entire season. As you mentioned, we've been talking about strengths within a team. And in today's episode, we're going to just sort of sit back and review where we've been, offer insights of what we've discovered, and summarize what we know to be true and consistent about the relationship building theme of these beautiful Clifton Strengths themes.
So, relationship building theme, what's it all about?
So all of these 4 domains are, of course, originated from Gallup's research on leadership. So they started out by answering that question, how do the most effective leaders lead? And the answer to the how question relative to relationship building is by connecting with people on a human level and leading them, I think, by their heart from your heart. What this means within your team and how it shows up beyond just thinking about the leadership aspect of our research, I think sometimes the relationship building domain is the easiest to understand at face value. Those words, relationship building, tend to answer the question, even if I hadn't offered, my words. But if you've ever been told that you're a people person, you might lead with relationship building. People strong in this domain typically tend to consider the people involved in a situation. They tend to notice individuals rather than groups. And they likely solve problems by sorting out the variables that human beings bring to the picture. So I think they are typically in the headspace of understanding, sensing, and appreciating everything that's promising, beautiful, and messy about people and connections between people.
I said relationship building theme, and that should have been domain in the last question. But which of these Clifton Strengths themes show up, and what do we know about them inside this domain?
If I look over to the side, if you're not listening to the audio and you're watching me, it's because I have a bookmark over there from our very first iteration of Accelerated Strengths Coaching. We gave out these funky bookmarks by domains, and they're on my mirror, and I list them all. And when I look to my relationship building bookmark, there are several themes. We're going to go through every single one of them. And while every theme has a different way of going about it, relationship building as a domain describes that talent to connect and care for and with people in order to reach a greater goal. So they're caring for the people, they're caring with the people, and they're connecting. And that's how they get us to where we're going. So remember, our talent themes don't just describe how we're wired, but how you're productively wired. And there's a really great comment later when we review other feedback that we've gotten, a reminder that these natural patterns create something. They change something. They help you and others perform really well. There are 9 themes in the relationship building domain. And I'm going to just cluster them together in different ways to hopefully offer a different way to illustrate these and help you appreciate them, help them land. You've got includer, harmony, relator, adaptability, positivity, connectedness, developer, empathy, and individualization. And if you think, I think about how do these bring individual talents to a team. So the entire goal of this season has been to help you expand beyond just saying, oh, relationship building means they build relationships, and instead help you answer that question of, okay, well, how specifically does this theme do it? Think about the connection between includer, harmony, and relator. These came up in last week when we recorded all three of them on the same day. I realized that I'd created a little bit of a package here. There's not science behind this. This is purely just broad brushstrokes of artistry. But the includer I would call social courage. Harmony is social clarity. Relator is social depth. Adaptability, positivity, and connectedness might be another package. Adaptability is tuned into today. Positivity is tuned into what's good, what's joyful, or what's optimistic. Connectedness is tuned into the universe. Developer empathy individualization might be your third package of how they challenge. Developer challenges you to grow. Empathy challenges you to feel. Individualization challenges you to specialize. Again, all of this is just hopefully helping you honor and consider the people on your team who lead with these. Not meant to label you or paint you into a box, but certainly I think helpful when we like to unpack and in order to get the most and to support each of these themes in the best way. People often wonder about the prevalence of themes, how often they should expect to see one specific theme or another. And of course, anytime you're looking at a team, you tend to do it domain by domain. I encourage you never to get too worried about the individual themes. It can be easy to see what's missing more than what's there, especially if you're looking at a team grid. The answer is not ever, oh gosh, we need more includer. But it might be, how do these relationship building themes show up as a whole instead of looking at, for all 34. But it's also important to think about how often might you expect to see any one of these 34. And it is interesting to look at that theme frequency. It is probably one of the most popular questions that we get the most feedback on. I do encourage you not to be more interested in the globe than you are the functionality of the team right in front of you. That being said, here's a little bit of trivia that might help you. When we look at top 5 and how often a theme shows up in your top 5, it can be helpful to understand what you might be able to expect as the most common. The most common of our relationship building themes is relator. Looking at our global database, this is when we had 21 million completes, which now we have quite a bit more, but it still remains true. The global database, relator is number 4. And you look at how often it shows up in people's top 5. So if everybody who's taken Clifton Strengths was one person, relator would be their number 4. And there are 3 relationship building themes in the global top 10. Those are harmony at number 6, empathy at number 9, and adaptability at number 10. The least common of the relationship building themes, if you're in the chat right now, go ahead and guess. Or if you know, go ahead and share what you know, but we're going to call it a guess. Go ahead, type into the chat which of the relationship building themes shows up least often in people's top 5. I'll give you a second. While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and remind you these relationship building themes in order of frequency, how often they tend to show up in people's top 5. Relator, as we mentioned, is number 4. About 27% of our population of completes has relator in their top 5, followed by harmony at about 20% and empathy at about 19%. Adaptability rounds out the global top 10 with about 17%. Now, the great reveal. Let's check the chat and see if anybody got it. Congratulations, Ralph. Of course it would be Ralph and Liesel. Connectedness is the least common of the relationship building themes, just about 12% of our population. It's by a very narrow margin. So if you also guessed includer, we'll count that. If I was grading your paper, I'd give you at least half credit for includer because it's just a narrow margin. So if you think about it, connectedness nearly ties includer. They both have just about 12% of our population, or the global, number 23, if you're ranking all 34 in order of how often they show up in your full top 5.
Mike, all the data nerds are just going crazy right now. They're like, slow down. You're trying to write this down.
I know.
Crazy.
I should have put on my new blue light glasses for them.
Nicely done.
Now, do you want to talk about it again since I have my glasses on?
Well, how does the relationship building theme show up in our global database?
Yeah, if the globe were a person and we were looking at a theme being in your top 5 as determining frequency, 4 of your top 10 are relationship building, but is number 11, number 12, and number 13. Simply by the numbers, you are likely to have someone with some meaningful relationship building talent on your team. So it's worthwhile not just to think about this through your head, but to start to internalize what this might mean for the connections that you have with people you love.
I actually see this happening in our community a lot where we spin a lot on these numbers. And
Mm.
what does this really tell us? So as we look at these, why is this important for managers and teams? How do we use these numbers?
Thanks, Jim. And I can preface everything I just did saying don't get too in love with the numbers, but it tends to be something really easy just to camp out on. Check yourself or get a good accountability partner to check yourself to ask exactly what Jim just asked me. What does this really mean? So, as always, I think we need to see a team for the value that each individual brings. It also means you should pay careful attention to studying the links between individuals, especially because we know there is a chance you'll have a lot of relationship building talent within a team. On the whole, if you look at your team and you realize there is frequent relationship building talent, it probably means that those connections between people are going to be even more important. It means that your people on that team might approach a problem through the implications it has on other humans. It also means that they're going to reach solutions through people. So they'll crowdsource when they want to think. Don't mistake that for idle chat. The way that relationship building people make sense of something is by testing it among their social circles. You can honor those connections with each other and among each other, and the connections that the people on your team have outside of your team, because that really is where their greatest power lies. Another thing I would maybe boil down relationship building, which is always dangerous, but it is caring for the energy between people. So if you think about empathy, it's understanding how people feel. Harmony is understanding where people agree. Relator understands long-term relationships or where people might have some longevity. Relationship building is inspired to improve. Includer, I think about as the usher who's bringing those outside in order to improve, or positivity, the energizer, bringing negative or neutral even emotion, flipping that switch into hope and excitement and joy. Developer is the bridge, bringing others from good to even better, or from not knowing to knowing. Relationship building is seeing people for who they are. Individualization, for example, is seeing and appreciating difference. Connectedness senses and values and sees a larger purpose and shared consequences. Adaptability sees, notices, and reacts to the needs of people in the urgent moment. So when you think about it, less about the origin story and less about the numbers and more about what positive implications does this domain have on the performance of your team, it helps you accelerate back to that question that Jim asked of, hey, how do we make sense of this? What does it really mean?
During the season, we've been focusing on some questions that managers can use with their team. So what advice would you have for managers with a team? They see the team grid and their team has lots of relationship building themes in it. What kind of advice would you have for them?
Yeah, first, it's ask yourself what you're wondering about. I've said this a couple times, but it's always stickier and more productive and probably more helpful to look at a team grid with a question in mind. That question is, you get bonus points if it's more than just what are they like. If there's a problem you're trying to solve, you're going to learn a lot more than just what are the strengths of my team. Now, if you're the manager, you're going to best come to what is that question, what is that problem I'm trying to solve through your own talent filter. So first, start with yourself. Identify your default. What do you do exceptionally well? How do you tend to approach a problem? What's your first instinct? How is that showing up on your team? And then maybe with the help of a coach, step back and evaluate the makeup of your team. If you weren't there, what are they excellent at doing without you? Where might they struggle? I think your first pit stop or your first opportunity to evaluate and adjust is at this stopping point. What do you bring to the team, and how do you change the dynamic of that team? Especially important when you're leading any team, but I think especially important that you pay attention to the connection between you and the team when you're looking at relationship building. Beyond that, and probably more directly to your question, Jim, here's a few things that you can notice about a team with a lot of relationship building talent. One, they're going to do things through other people. So encourage that development to happen socially. Sending them individually to learn something might be okay, but hosting a discussion for them to share their discoveries together probably honors their talents a little bit better. And know that if this is a route that you're going to take, you might hear ideas out loud among this team that aren't fully polished or even fully believed yet, and that's okay. Remember, they're learning collaboratively. So take great care to create a container of trust where people can learn and feel okay to stumble and discover together. Sometimes we look at teams with a lot of relationship building talent and just instantly assume that they're all friends with each other. But another thing you can do as a manager is to realize that it doesn't mean that those connections each of those individuals have is with each other. So you might even just think about, how can I create a place where their relationships that they're building and that they're loving and that they're honoring are here on this team, not exclusively, but understanding you might need to cultivate and kind of fertilize that space so that they can grow really rich relationships with each other. I think one way to think about that is, when the people on your team have something important in their life, who do they want to share it with? Maybe their family, maybe their community, maybe their best friends outside the team. But make your goal or maybe a marker of success is that when big things are happening in the lives of your teammates, that they at least want to share it with one other person on that team. That's an important anchor for people with high relationship building themes. Make sure you create time for them to spend together, to bring each other into that trust and social circles that each other has. If you don't, they're either not going to connect with each other, which hurts them more than it would hurt people without strong relationship building, or they're probably going to find a way to insert that social connection time into places that you haven't budgeted for. So consider creating a daily route for them to unwind, or a daily routine for them to share the day's events. If you're doing this virtually, maybe it is a check-in, maybe it's a group chat, maybe it's a fun space. I think they're going to appreciate that collaborative exhale together, and they're going to benefit from just the cadence and the rhythm of knowing that, hey, I'm expected to make my discoveries out loud, to connect with other people, to share something.
Some great advice. And I keep thinking through some of the teams that I've been on and the managers that have tied into this and have really taken advantage of it from improving. I love what you said about, don't just make an assumption that those relationships are being made with each other. Mm-hmm. They may be outside the team, and that's okay. Right. But we have a great opportunity to build those into the team as well. Right. So everybody asks, okay, what if I come to the team grid and the team has low, or maybe let's just say it's less frequent? What would we say then? What kind of advice would we have?
First of all, it's a great way to say it, less frequent. Or you could say dominant and rare. When you consider the DNA of a team, it's most helpful and fastest to look at, what does everybody lead with? What does everyone on that team have high in their profile? So again, you're never going to say, oh, we don't have relationship building talent. Acknowledge that there might actually be one or two people on your team who lead with it, but maybe they're in the minority. It's not weak, it's rare. And just like anything that's rare, it's our job to honor it, just shine some light on it, to be curious about it. And then it depends on what you want to accomplish, but it also depends on the makeup of the team. A group of people who rely on each other for success and are truly interconnected are going to behave differently than a group of contributors who are a little bit more independent, who might only be a team on paper, or who rely independently on their manager, or even think about like the kind of solo contributors that simply roll up to a people leader. So before you make the assumption that every team has to function the same way, I think it's good to ask yourself a couple things. What is the level of interdependence from this team on a daily basis? What do we hope to learn or to improve or to solve with strengths? When will our team have another chance to practice what they learn in a conversation about strengths? So sometimes the real reason people want to bring you in as a coach is just to improve the emotional state of the group. And that conversation can be more about what each team member wants to share about their own talent. Sometimes it is actually about how do we work better together, in which case I think you can have more functional conversations about shifting who is responsible for different things. Now, it's okay if it is both of these situations. It's also okay if it's neither of them. But I think it's your job as a coach or as a manager to do your due diligence and figure out exactly what is the lay of the land where we're beginning. Now, if you're a manager seeking to improve, let's say, the performance of your team, and your team's relationship building talent is rare, acknowledge the behavior that you want employees to repeat. Set aside maybe the first or last 30 minutes of your week to send an email, send a text, or write a handwritten note to other people who are doing great work. Basically, what we're saying here is build those relationships and care for the connections in a way that makes sense for you. If it has to feel a little bit more like a task coming from you, it might not change the way that still needs to happen. And so it's still just about honoring those relationships just in a way that feels a little bit more authentic. As team members are working on projects, encourage them to include some milestones for social connection. For example, when they're halfway to a goal, put it in their plan to have lunch with each other and discuss what's working well. Challenge employees to consider how they'd like other people in the organization to know them. Maybe you adopt a team slogan that inspires them or motivates them to live up to that aspirational identity.
Micah, there's some really great advice in there. Where could folks get more information or find more about it?
So this is just a taste of a lot of the great consulting that happens when you're with a Gallup coach or a Gallup certified strengths coach. It's also a taste of the personalized management nudges included in Gallup Access. So if you have yet to really explore Gallup Access or become a really super user of it, this is the online portal into the world of everything Gallup knows, what we continue to discover, what we're learning, and it really is set up to serve managers. So managers who use Gallup Access get these kind of individualized suggestions just like this every single time they log in. And the system gets smarter as you use it. So it's a little bit like having a coach in your pocket or on your screen.
And where could folks get a demo on this?
Gallup.com/access.
And if you have questions, you can always email us, coaching@gallup.com. We reached out to the community, and when I say we, I actually mean you reached out to the community, Micah. What'd you hear back from the community on this?
We just asked folks, as we have for each of our domain wrap episodes this season, how are you using this? And Jim, we've tossed this idea around a little bit. I think how are you using our tools might be the next frontier. But we got a bunch of great insight so that we can, again, tailor it to you, because we can camp out on everything that we know. We can go towards science or artistry or utility, but if it's not being, I think, productively added to what you know and what you do with it, then it doesn't serve you best. So thank you to everybody who responded. It was just a really quick question that I threw out there on our Facebook page of, what are you learning? What are you using? What are you discovering? I just want to highlight a few things because I think they will help you consider different ways that you can tune your ear to the last of our season 6 here of Theme Thursday. Holly says that she loved the questions managers can ask section this season. She says it's just a really great tool. And also about the relationship building themes, I wanted to pull out what she said here. She said, those themes seem to bring a security to a team that's unique from other domains. I just love that idea of security, especially when you think about the needs of followers. Maybe you use a word like stability as well. She says each domain is important and brings critical things to a team, but I see relationship building themes as the heart of a team.
I do love that little emphasis on that. And of course, all of them can provide that stability, that safety, that trust. But I love the unique insight that she has.
Right. And if you want to learn more about all themes across the 4 domains, that's season 3 of Theme Thursday, talking about how every single theme goes through those needs of followers. Laura says it's easy to get caught up in the warm, fuzzy side of relationship building themes that we forget that they're strengths because they're correlated with success.
Yeah, and the one of the interesting things we've been trying to spend time on is thinking about focusing on results, right? I asked that question during How does it focus on the results? And so we definitely want to make sure people get that these are success factors. It's not yes, getting along and all those things are important, but we are really trying to drive people to success.
Right. It's not just how do you behave. That is not the end of the question. It never was. It is reverse engineering. Wow, you're really successful. How'd you get there?
Right.
And that's an incredibly different question. Mark Russell, who, by the way, is a newly certified Gallup Strengths coach, says it helped taking notes so that I can reference them as I prep for coaching discussions. I continue to have a whole session for managers on the 5 truths and continue to reinforce during an engagement. I just think that's a good reminder that these episodes can help you prepare for coaching sessions, whether you are getting those themes into your head so that you can prepare to coach somebody on them, or maybe you share it with a client as pre-work or as post-work after a coaching engagement, or even you share it with a team and say, you know what, you can show up and we can accelerate even beyond where you are if you've done a little bit of the learning ahead of time, and then we can discover together in a way that we couldn't do on our own.
Yeah. No, what else have we heard, Micah?
Clara says, I just loved this one. I'll close with this on how she's using her own relationship building themes. She says, I'm trusting my gut more. In the past, I would have had an idea or thought that seemed a little too mushy or crazy. But now, watch out, world. If my gut says do it, I'm doing it. And then she talked about just the difference that she's gone through here in 2020, being in quarantine and being isolated socially. She says, maybe I'm replacing the hugging I miss. Who knows? But I'm sending the card. I'm giving the positive feedback. I'm making the phone call of support. Thank you, Clara. I just love that.
When I came in on Tuesday of this week, I saw my manager for the first time in a couple months, and he said to me, "I just want to give you a hug." Of course, we didn't, but it is, during these times as we think about these relationship building themes, I think this is really important that we tune into some of the needs of some of the folks we either manage or we coach in that. And that's not to say, I think sometimes people misunderstand when we talk about each of these themes. That they find exclusivity based on the domain or the theme. And of course, that's so much wider than that. And so I've always appreciated, Micah, your take on that. Much of that take has come out in our talent mindfulness exercises. And we brought them back for the year. We've been going through, I almost get daily. It's probably not that often. It just feels that often. I almost get a daily feedback from people saying they just have really enjoyed and appreciated that. What has that meant to you? In writing these? You have to actually write them each time we do it. What has that meant to you?
Well, originally we started it because we wanted some vehicle to push people off of the ledge. Oh, no, we wanted to push people out of the library and onto the track.
Yeah.
Right. We wanted to have something that took people beyond naming. And that is what people tell us they struggle with. Once they've understood all 34 themes, I'd say the second mountain that they have to climb is, how do I help people apply these? What do I do with it? And so we started this with season 5, hopefully as just a grand experiment to say, what if you thought about strengths as something you practiced every day? And I personally never thought, I wondered if I could do it 34 times. And now we've done it a lot more than that, because we a lot more than that. By the end of the season, we'll have about 80 of them. And it's been amazing to see that people actually love it. You'll notice if you watch some of the previous ones, I started rather tentatively saying, don't try this if it's not for you. And now I think I can stand up and say, no, this is for you. This is worth it. Give it a try. To me, it is our commitment to realize that we're not just coaching people from the sidelines. We're part of this. And our understanding of how our own themes show up are probably the most important investment that we can make. And it's just a simple 3 to 5 minutes every day, every week, even. It can be super easy just to say, okay, I'm part of the equation too.
I'm seeing more and more people use them, getting requests to use them. How can we use them? Some of those kinds of things. So you always know you've got a winner in there, like when you start getting usage out of it. So we appreciate that as well. Let's look ahead. Strategic thinking is coming up, and give us some thoughts on what's ahead.
we've saved strategic thinking for Ralph for the very end. So Ralph in our chat will be pleased to know that yes, strategic thinking is coming up next. Check out my bookmark. You've got analytical, context, futuristic, ideation, input, intellection, learner, and strategic in that order. I think that these themes might be if relationship building is the easiest to understand at face value, these might be some of the most difficult to understand at face value as a domain, because you look at it and you think, well, that means that you can be a leader. And I'm going to burst your bubble right now. It's not what it means. The strategic thinking themes really describe people who are just at their best when they're in their brain. It does not mean that they're more intelligent than others or that they have more plans than others. Some of them might, but I am so excited to start to look at the differences between these strategic thinking themes, because I think one of the things that's really confusing about this domain is because it's so easy to think, oh, it's just about thinking. We don't do enough digging to really see what's the difference between them. So how does somebody with futuristic create a plan versus somebody with context? They're both in the same domain, except they almost describe theoretical opposites of talent. So I'm excited to get to talk about strategic thinking.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We always this has been great for me to look at these domain by domain. And it's just the learning is so rich when we get to think of them that way. Any final thoughts on relationship building domain?
Oh, it's so beautiful. You know, my final thought, I just want to echo what was said in some of the feedback that we got, that don't get lost in these being warm and fuzzy. We all have a lot of love in our life. We all have a need for a lot of love in our life. It doesn't matter if you have relationship building or if you lead with the other three. We all need connection. We all do better when we have it. Relationship building just tends to lead with that at the very beginning, but it's still just about how can you perform better.
Super great. With that, I think we'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available now through Gallup Access. Micah mentioned a little bit earlier. Easiest portal into that is gallup.com/Clifton Strengths. Lots of resources available on that page as well. Maybe it's time to take a second look, or third look, and see what's available to you that is out there. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe to us down below right now. Click the like button too. That's always super helpful. Just kind of give us some juice, some YouTube juice to move us up in the rankings. So do that.
YouTube juice.
That sounded gross, didn't it? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know, but I like it. YouTube fairy dust. I don't know.
Maybe I'll take that one back. If you have questions, you can email us, coaching@gallup.com. Don't ever let me say that again. And then, of course, if you want to follow the live programs and join us live, because it's always a lot more fun live. You get the post show when you come out live. Follow us on Eventbrite, gallup.eventbrite.com. In the Facebook group, if you want to head out there, we have almost 14,000 in that Facebook group. If you want to join that conversation, facebook.com/group/called-to-coach. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, you can search Clifton Strengths Trained Coaches, and that will get you there as well. We want to say thank you for joining us live today. We'll do a little bit of post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.